What if I told you that when she chooses another man over you, it's not your loss, but actually your biggest win? You see, rejection feels like the end, but in reality, it's the start of something far more powerful, your true value finally being protected. When a woman chooses another man over you, the very first instinct that often strikes a man is this deep, suffocating feeling of inadequacy. It's the thought that creeps into your mind at 2 a.m. Wasn't I good enough? Did I fail to make her happy? Was there something about me that he had and I didn't? This inner dialogue is dangerous because it distorts the reality of what actually happened. You start measuring your worth against another man's presence in her life. But let me tell you this with absolute clarity. Her decision to choose someone else is not a reflection of your value as a man. It's a reflection of her own values, her priorities, and the lens through which she views relationships. Women, like men, operate from a set of personal standards, beliefs, and emotional triggers. Some women value consistency, loyalty, and emotional stability. Others, whether consciously or unconsciously, are driven more by surface-level attractions like status, wealth, or charm. When she gravitates towards another man, it's not that you lack worth. It's that her definition of value may not align with what you bring to the table. And this is where most men go wrong. They assume that because she didn't see their worth, it must mean that they don't have any. But worth is not something granted by another person. It is not something that can be validated or invalidated by her acceptance or rejection. Worth is intrinsic. It's in who you are, the values you stand by, and the way you show up in life. Think about this carefully. If a woman is willing to walk away from you for someone else, what is she really communicating? She's communicating her preferences. She's communicating her hierarchy of needs. And sometimes she's communicating her inability to recognize true value when it's in front of her. That doesn't mean you suddenly become less intelligent, less attractive, less ambitious, or less capable of love. It simply means she weighed things on her personal scale and made a choice, but that choice belongs to her. It does not define you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some women are not equipped to handle real strength, real consistency, and real masculine energy. They may crave excitement, novelty, or validation more than stability and commitment. If that is what drives her, then she will always choose the man who fits her temporary craving, not the one who embodies long-term value. And that is not your flaw. It is her value system in action. When you understand this, rejection loses its sting. Because now, instead of thinking, I wasn't enough, you recognize she wasn't aligned with my values. Let me give you an example. Imagine a man who is disciplined, calm, and grounded in his life purpose. He doesn't play games, he doesn't chase, he doesn't sell himself short. He offers loyalty, emotional safety, and vision for the future. But if a woman chooses another man because he has flashier cars, louder confidence, or a lifestyle that feeds her ego temporarily, what does that really show? It doesn't reveal that the grounded man is lacking. It reveals that her values are rooted in superficial attractions rather than deeper alignment. The calm man hasn't lost anything. He has only been protected from investing in someone who wouldn't have respected his essence in the long run. When you anchor your self-worth in how others respond to you, you will always be at their mercy. If she stays, you feel valuable. If she leaves, you feel broken. That's a dangerous cycle to live in. But when you internalize the truth that her choice reflects her values, not your worth, you break free from that emotional roller coaster. You begin to see her decision as information, not a verdict. You gain the clarity to say, so this is what she values. And now I know that my energy, my love, my time deserves to be invested in someone who values what I offer. The strongest men understand that rejection is not humiliation, it's revelation. Every time someone leaves you, every time someone chooses another person, they reveal something critical about who they are and what they want. And that knowledge is a gift because it saves you from years of frustration, disappointment, and wasted effort. Rejection is one of those experiences that shakes the very core of a man's confidence. When you've invested your time, your emotions, your energy, and even parts of your identity into a woman, and she decides she doesn't want you, especially if she chooses another man, it feels like the ground beneath you has collapsed. The sting is sharp, the wound is deep, and the natural reaction is to believe that something has been taken away from you forever. But here's the truth: most men fail to recognize in those painful moments. Rejection is not the end of your path, it is the redirection towards a better one. Life does not close doors to punish you, it closes them to protect you and to lead you where you actually belong. When a woman rejects you, it's easy to get stuck replaying every single memory in your head. You overanalyze what you could have said differently, what you should have done differently, how you could have looked better or acted more confident. But in reality, this obsessive reflection only traps you in a loop of self-blame. You forget the bigger picture. You forget that rejection is simply life whispering to you, not here, not with her, not in this way. It's not erasing your chances at love, connection, or happiness. It's pushing you toward the right alignment where your energy, values, and heart will be reciprocated. If she walks away, then she was not meant to walk with you into your future. That's not tragedy, it's clarity. Think about the times in your life when something you desperately wanted didn't work out, only for you to realize later that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to you. Maybe it was a job you didn't get, a friend who betrayed you, or an opportunity that slipped through your hands. In the moment, it felt like devastation. But looking back, you can often see that if you had gotten what you thought you wanted, you would have been trapped in a situation that was smaller than your potential, less than your worth, or incompatible with your future. Relationships work the same way. If she leaves, it's not a detour into loneliness. It's the redirection into growth, discovery, and eventually a connection that won't require you to fight for scraps of respect or attention. Men who fail to understand this principle often self-destruct after rejection. They spiral into bitterness, resentment, or worse, they start begging and chasing, believing that convincing her to come back is the only way to restore their value. But the moment you do that, you lose your power. You hand her the keys to your self-worth and ask her to decide if you're worthy. That's not masculine energy, that's desperation. Instead, the man who understands rejection as redirection remains grounded. He sees that her decision is not the erasure of his future. It is simply a signpost telling him, this road is not for you. Turn here. A better path awaits. There is another layer to this that most men ignore. Sometimes rejection happens because you are not yet ready for what you think you want. If you had gotten her, maybe you would have compromised your mission, your growth, or your potential just to keep her. Maybe she would have distracted you from becoming the man you are meant to become. Sometimes the pain of her absence is the very fuel you need to rise, to evolve, and to step into the strongest version of yourself. Without rejection, many men would never awaken their deeper potential. They would settle, they would stagnate, and they would stop pushing themselves. Rejection can be the shock to your system that forces you to get back on track, to rediscover your purpose, and to build a life so powerful that no woman's departure can break you. Imagine for a moment that rejection isn't a wall, but a doorway. A wall says you can't go any further. A doorway says, not this room, but another one. Walk through. Too many men treat rejection like a wall, sitting down in front of it, crying and convincing themselves they've reached the end. But men who thrive treat rejection like a doorway. They don't stop walking, they don't stop searching, they keep moving forward because they understand that the universe never subtracts without adding. It never denies without preparing something greater. One of the biggest traps men fall into when it comes to women and relationships is the scarcity mindset. This is the belief that there are only a few opportunities out there, that this one woman is somehow the only source of love, attention, and connection they will ever find. When a man operates from scarcity, he clings. He compromises his dignity, his boundaries, and sometimes even his self-respect just to keep her from leaving. In his mind, if she walks away, his entire world collapses. This is the man who begs, pleads, overinvests, and accepts behaviors he should never tolerate, all because he has convinced himself that she is irreplaceable. But what men often don't realize is that this mindset doesn't just damage their self-esteem, it also makes them profoundly unattractive. Women can feel when a man is operating from fear, from desperation, from the idea that she is his only option. And nothing kills attraction faster than the energy of scarcity. On the other hand, men who step into an abundance mindset carry themselves differently. They understand that while one woman may not choose them, there are millions of women in the world, each with unique personalities, values, and preferences. They know that one rejection, one breakup, or one loss doesn't define their romantic future. Instead of clinging to the idea that she was the only chance at love, they recognize that every ending is just space being cleared for a better beginning. Abundance doesn't mean arrogance or treating women as disposable. It means understanding that love, connection, and opportunity are limitless when you are grounded in your purpose, growth, and self-respect. Scarcity tells you, if I lose her, I lose everything. Abundance tells you, if I lose her, I gain space for someone who aligns with me. Scarcity makes you act out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of not finding another woman, fear of never being chosen again. Abundance makes you act from confidence because you know your worth isn't attached to whether one woman stays or goes. This shift in mindset is not just about how you approach women, it's about how you approach life. A man who operates from abundance doesn't panic when things don't go his way. He sees possibilities everywhere. He knows that the universe is full of opportunities and that what is meant for him will always make its way to him without him needing to beg, chase, or compromise. The scarcity mindset often starts from insecurity. If deep down you don't believe you're valuable, you'll assume that any woman who gives you attention is doing you a favor. You'll hold on to her even if she disrespects you, cheats, or undermines your masculinity, because you don't believe another woman will see you as worthy. But abundance flips this narrative completely. When you know you are valuable, when you know what you bring to the table, when you are building your life with vision and strength, you recognize that women are not scarce. They are drawn to men who carry this energy. Suddenly, you stop clinging and you start choosing. You stop begging to be kept and you start deciding who is worthy of your time, energy, and commitment. A man living in scarcity views a woman leaving as devastation. He interprets it as the end of his chance at love, as proof that he is not enough. But a man living in abundance views the same moment as liberation. He doesn't see her walking away as proof of his inadequacy. He sees it as proof that she wasn't aligned with his journey. He doesn't panic about replacing her because he knows women are not the source of his value. His value comes from his purpose, his discipline, and his growth, and women are naturally drawn to men who live in that space. When you internalize the abundance mindset, you begin to operate from power rather than fear. You stop seeing relationships as a desperate fight to hold on and instead see them as a natural flow. If she stays, it's because she aligns with you. And if she leaves, it's because life is redirecting you to someone who will value you more deeply. The shift from scarcity to abundance is the shift from weakness to strength, from desperation to composure, from insecurity to confidence. It's the difference between chasing women and attracting them, between being controlled by rejection and using rejection as fuel to grow. When a woman chooses another man and walks out of your life, the immediate pain can feel unbearable. It feels like betrayal. It feels like abandonment. It feels like your heart has been ripped out of your chest. And in that storm of emotions, it's almost impossible to see clearly. But here's the truth that men often realize much later. Her leaving you is sometimes the very thing that frees you from settling for less than you deserve. You see, settling doesn't always look like misery on the surface. Sometimes it looks like comfort, routine, and compromise that slowly eats away at your confidence and your purpose. You may not even notice it while you're in it because the human mind is wired to cling to the familiar. But the moment she leaves, the illusion shatters and you're forced to confront what you had actually been accepting. Many men settle in relationships because they are afraid of being alone. They tolerate disrespect, neglect, or lack of reciprocity just to keep a woman by their side. They tell themselves, at least I have someone, at least I'm not alone at night. But deep down, they know that the connection isn't balanced, that their efforts aren't matched, and that the woman they're with doesn't fully respect or admire them. The truth is, if she chooses another man, she may have just saved you from years of giving yourself to someone who would never truly give herself to you in return. In that sense, her leaving is not cruelty, it is clarity. It exposes the fact that you were settling, even if you couldn't see it at the time. Think about it. A man who knows his worth and lives in his purpose should never have to beg for loyalty, chase for attention, or fight to be valued. The moment you find yourself constantly convincing her of your worth, you are already settling. The moment you overlook consistent red flags because you're afraid of losing her, you are already settling. And if she finally leaves, what has really happened is that life has pulled you out of a place you should have never stayed in to begin with. It may feel like loss in the moment, but in reality, it's release. She has released you from the trap of mediocrity, from investing your energy into something that was never going to give you the return you deserve. There's another angle to this that most men don't consider. Sometimes when you settle, you don't just lose yourself. You also block the opportunity to meet the right woman. As long as you are entangled with someone who doesn't truly align with your values, you are unavailable for the one who does. You spend your time, your emotions, your money, and your energy on the wrong person, leaving nothing for the woman who would have truly seen you. So when she leaves, she isn't just taking herself away, she is clearing space for someone better. She is unintentionally making room for a woman who won't need convincing, who won't waver when tempted, and who will naturally admire and respect the man you are. Men often think that being chosen is the win and being left is the loss. But sometimes being left is the biggest win of all because it snaps you out of complacency. It forces you to reevaluate your standards, your boundaries, and your direction in life. It teaches you to never again accept less than you give. It reminds you that love is not about settling for whoever happens to stay. It's about aligning with someone who matches your energy and respects your journey. The pain of her leaving might blind you temporarily, but with time, you begin to see that she didn't take your future away. She simply removed the dead weight that was keeping you from it. Rejection is one of the hardest pills for a man to swallow because it strikes at the heart of his ego. When a woman turns you down, when she leaves you, or when she chooses another man over you, the sting cuts deep. It feels personal, as though your very identity as a man has been questioned. And in those moments, many men collapse into shame, anger, or self-pity. But what most fail to recognize is that rejection, while painful, is the very ingredient that forges strength. Masculine energy is not built in times of comfort. It is built in times of loss, challenge, and disappointment. Rejection is not meant to weaken you. It is meant to sharpen you into the kind of man who no longer crumbles when life doesn't go his way. When you experience rejection, you are faced with two choices: to let it break you or to let it build you. The first path is easy but destructive. You drown in self-blame, you question your worth, and you let bitterness dictate your actions. The second path is harder but transformative. You take the pain, you use it as fuel, and you channel it into becoming stronger, wiser, and more disciplined. Every man who has ever risen into true power has faced rejection along the way. It's not a detour from the journey of manhood, it's part of the initiation. Without it, you remain fragile, untested, and dependent on external validation to feel strong. With it, you are forced to confront yourself, to rebuild from within, and to anchor your confidence in something deeper than a woman's acceptance. Rejection builds masculine strength because it strips away illusions. It exposes where you've been weak, where you've been needy, where you've been careless with your boundaries. It shows you the cracks in your foundation and forces you to repair them. Maybe you've been placing too much of your value in her approval. Maybe you've been neglecting your purpose, your growth, or your self-discipline in the pursuit of her affection. Maybe you've been living as a half version of yourself, expecting her presence to complete you. Rejection tears all of that down and demands that you rebuild stronger, more self-reliant, and more grounded in your own identity. There is a certain kind of resilience that only comes from being told no. When you face rejection and keep moving, you develop emotional armor. You stop fearing loss because you've already experienced it and survived. You stop fearing women's disapproval because you know your value doesn't crumble without their validation. You stop fearing solitude because you learn that solitude is where you grow, strengthen, and refine yourself. This emotional resilience is magnetic to women. Ironically, the very rejection that once made you feel powerless becomes the reason you begin to attract respect, admiration, and interest without even trying, because rejection forces you to embody strength instead of just pretending to have it. Think about a man who has never been rejected. On the surface, he may look confident, but underneath, he's fragile. The moment something doesn't go his way, he falls apart. He has no tolerance for discomfort because he's never been tested. Now compare that to the man who has been rejected, who has been abandoned, who has been overlooked, and instead of collapsing, he has risen each time. That man carries a different energy. He doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he doesn't crumble, because he knows he can survive without validation. His strength isn't theoretical, it's proven. He has been through fire and come out harder, sharper, and calmer. Women feel that energy instinctively. They can sense the man who has been tested and the man who hasn't, and they are always drawn to the one who carries the weight of his scars with quiet confidence. Rejection also builds focus. When she leaves, when you lose, when you are told you're not enough, you have two choices: obsess over her or invest in yourself. The man who obsesses stays stuck, but the man who invests begins to build. He trains his body, he sharpens his mind, he deepens his purpose, he creates wealth, he strengthens his discipline. All of this stems from the energy of rejection. The pain becomes power, the loss becomes leverage, and the wound becomes wisdom. Over time, he realizes that what felt like destruction was actually construction. Rejection wasn't taking away from him. It was building him into the kind of man who commands respect, with or without a woman standing beside him. One of the most overlooked truths men need to understand is that in any situation where a woman leaves you, cheats on you, or chooses another man over you, your real victory lies in how you carry yourself afterwards. You might think winning means getting her back, convincing her to stay, or proving to her that you're better than the man she chose. But that is not victory. That is desperation disguised as persistence. The real win is not about having her. The real win is about having yourself. And that comes down to one thing: dignity. A man who keeps his dignity, even in the face of rejection and betrayal, walks away with something far more valuable than the temporary satisfaction of holding on to someone who didn't value him. Dignity is your power. It's the quiet strength of knowing that you will never beg for love, you will never plead for loyalty, and you will never lower your standards just to be chosen. When she chooses another man, she may think she has power over you. She may even expect you to chase, to fight, or to break down in her absence. And many men fall into that trap. They lose their composure, they send desperate messages, they humiliate themselves in attempts to prove their worth to someone who has already dismissed them. But in doing that, they don't just lose the woman, they lose themselves. They trade dignity for desperation, and once that dignity is gone, it takes years to rebuild. But the man who holds his dignity refuses to be shaken. He doesn't go begging. He doesn't try to compete with the new man. He doesn't try to prove his value to someone who couldn't recognize it when it was freely given. Instead, he stands calm, composed, and focused. He understands that respect is worth more than attention, and silence is louder than desperation. His restraint, his ability to walk away without making a scene, without seeking revenge, without crumbling, that is his victory. Because in a world where most men lose themselves over women, the man who keeps his dignity rises above them all. There is also something deeply magnetic about dignity. A man who respects himself, even when rejected, sends a powerful message not just to her, but to everyone watching. He communicates, "My value does not decrease because you failed to see it. My worth is not up for negotiation. My energy is not given to those who don't deserve it." That kind of presence leaves an impression. And here's the irony. Many times, the very woman who left begins to feel regret when she sees the man she walked away from hold himself with calm strength. Not because he chased her, not because he tried to win her back, but because he showed that he doesn't need her to define his value. Dignity always turns the tables, even if you never intended it to. Dignity is also protection. When you lose your self-respect chasing after someone who has already chosen to leave, you hand her all the power. She now controls your emotions, your peace, and your sense of worth. But when you keep your dignity, you protect your energy, you shield your heart and your mind from unnecessary turmoil. Instead of wasting months or years trying to hold on to someone who doesn't want to stay, you redirect that energy into building yourself. You work on your goals, your health, your growth, your future. And over time, the very pain of her departure becomes irrelevant because you have built something greater, yourself. A man who loses everything but keeps his dignity has not lost it all. Because women will come and go, relationships will start and end, people will choose you, and people will reject you. But your dignity is the one thing that defines who you are when all else is stripped away. The world respects a man who respects himself. And when you carry that kind of dignity, you stop fearing loss. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing her leaving because you know that no matter what happens, you will never abandon yourself. That is the ultimate win. So understand this. When she chooses another man, you don't lose, you win. You win because her choice reveals her values, not your worth. You win because rejection is not destruction, it is redirection. You win because you shift from scarcity to abundance, knowing that one woman's absence doesn't define your future. You win because she frees you from settling for a love that was never truly aligned with you. You win because every rejection forges your masculine strength and makes you unshakable. And above all, you win because you keep your dignity, your calm, and your self-respect intact. This is not about her, it's about you. Her departure is simply the mirror that reflects back the man you are becoming. And if you can walk away from her choice with strength, clarity, and composure, you will realize that the biggest victory is not in being chosen. The biggest victory is in choosing yourself.